Hi, I'm going to talk a little bit about my OP1 and how I write music with it. First things first, the largest complaint people seem to have about it is that there's a lot of noise that comes over through the headphone port when you're using headphones. And I find that's easily resolved with getting something like a headphone amp. In this case, I've got the FiiO Andes. It's got two outputs, which is great if you want to have it going to, for example, to a mixer as well as headphones, or to your computer as well as headphones, or to two headphones if you want to write music with somebody and you don't want to bother the people around you. Aside from that, I'll show you how I set my OP1 up for writing music. So there are 4 tracks in the digital tape. I always use track 4 for percussion, so drums. I use track 3 for bass, track 2 for pads, and track 1 for lead type synths or little pizzicato or pluck kind of synths. And I set my instruments up the same way. Tracks 7 and 8s are always kind of one-offs or instruments I used to play around with. Tracks 5 and 6 are always the bass, so I always use 5 and 6 on channel 3. I always use instruments 3 and 4 on channel 2, and instruments 1 and 2 on channel 1. So it's easily divided and easy to come back to if I've left my OP1 for a few days and I can't remember which instrument is supposed to go where and I don't want to get them mixed up. It makes it really easy to keep track of things, so things are really well organized and not just recorded all over the place. I set everything flat. My mixer's always flat. Everything's always at full volume. My equalizer's flat. Effects are off to start with. And that's how I set it up. When I want to actually start recording, I'll just show you quickly how I record. So I think I've already got a drum track set up here. Really basic, so I'm just making sure I'm on track 4 and letting it go. Making sure my input volume is at max. You can also let it record a while by holding the sequence down and then turning the red knob to activate the hold. So I don't need to hold onto the button anymore. Okay. I've set a loop point to this point in the song, so every time I hit the stop button, it'll always come back to that point. So I can always go right back to the beginning of what I've started to record. So I've got a basic drum track going. It does sound a little flat, so what I can do is again open up the drums, and I use the finger sequencer for just smaller fills. So this is a basic hat, so still on track 4. I'll just do this and let it go for a while. Okay, that's good. It does sound a little flat, so I'm actually going to do this. I think I've got I've already got one set up here. So I'll actually drop the input volume down a little bit, and I've got a second hi-hat going, so I'll just do this. I'll turn the master volume down a little bit. This doesn't affect the recording volume. So one reason why I record more than just copy, cutting, or pasting is because whenever you cut and paste, you run the risk of having these little artifacts here, these little clicks that happen at the paste point. So I avoid those just by recording everything fully. It's a little bit more work because you can only have one sequence at a time in the endless sequencer, which is this thing, that's the endless sequencer. So I do go back and I do reprogram a lot of the sequences just so I don't wind up copying, cutting, and pasting at all. But it does make the end product sound better because there's less little clicks and pops whenever you do have that paste point. So far I've got that going on, which is good enough for the purposes of this video. So now I'll record a bass track. So I'll go to my bass instrument, which is going to be over here. Go over to my endless sequencer. Okay, and record. Okay, it's a little bit too fast. That works. Okay. So now I'm on track 3. I'm just going to turn the hold on. Now one of the tricks I use to make the thinner sounds sound a little bit fuller is I open up the same instrument. For example, I've got the same basic bass instrument on 5 and 6, or same basic bass synth on 5 and 6, but with slight differences in how they sound. So I'll just turn the off. So that's the main bass, and then with a few tweakings I've got this. And it's basically I just turn this blue knob a little bit. Okay. So I'm going to basically do the exact same thing. Turn the master volume down just so I can talk, and like I said, I do find that it makes the normally thin sounding synth a little bit fuller sounding. Again, nowhere near an analog synth, but it gets the job done. Okay. And now I'm going to add a little bit of syncopation. So I'll just go back to go back to my endless sequencer and start here. Screwed that up. Yep, that's what I want. So I'm going to turn the recording volume down a little bit so I get that kind of effect to it. that's good enough. Open up my endless sequencer again. Now I'm going to put in one of my melodies. Okay. Sounds great. I've got track 2 selected because it's going to be, well, instrument number 3. So I'll just go into it. Sounds great, and what I'm actually going to do is, because I've already set up the sequence, I might as well add, again, a little bit more fullness by adding a second part to that pad, but like this. Okay, so this is what we've got so far. I don't know if you noticed or not, but one thing I tend to do is, instead of letting go of the key before the pattern's over, I let it continue, so that way I do get that nice sustain, so when I do make a transition, that note at least carries over. Whereas if I stopped it too early, then that will get cut off, and because it's not MIDI, I'd have to go back and actually re-record it if I wanted to have something there with that sustain. Again, it's one of the particularities of how you write music with the OP1, but just thinking ahead and keeping that sustain going into all your transitions is something to keep in mind. So this is just a small part of a fuller song I've written. I'll just play the beginning part for you. I'll link it below for the full song. And some of the little tricks are pretty easy to do. Like I'll just I'll set my endpoint to here just to show you a few other things quickly. This is I mean, to fade in a part, it's pretty easy. You just turn the recording volume all the way off, trigger the record, and then slowly bring the recording volume up. If you look over here, and then fade out. You can also, well, I'll just set this to hold. While you're recording, you can also change the synth in real time. So any changes you make here while the sequence is playing would get recorded. Same with any changes to the effects. Basically whatever you hear gets recorded. I think one of the other tricks I use normally but didn't use here today, and I don't know if I mentioned it or not, was with my percussion. With some of the things like hats, snares, and claps, I'll have a regular snare on one note and then repeat it at a lower volume on the other. So whenever I'm setting up a sequence, I can do that without having to go back here and then re-record something with the volume lower, or the input volume a little bit lower. So that's pretty much it. I don't really use the sampler or the microphone a lot. But again, it's just a great device to play around with. Like once I've recorded something, I'll go back and play it and then mess around with the playback speeds to see if I like it at a faster tempo. When it's playing, you can mess around with the actual speed to make it sound like a tape warping. And again, anything you do while you're recording to the instrument that you're recording gets recorded. So I can manipulate anything, and whatever sequence is being played gets recorded that way. Or I could, if I want to play around with how something sounds, I'll just mute that. I'll play around with the cow phaser. So again, if I was recording the bass while manipulating this, the bass would get recorded or the effect would get recorded in real time. And that's pretty much it. I'll link the song below if you guys want to hear how the whole thing sounded together. So again, that's what I just wrote. And that's it. Thanks for watching.